pushed into the net by Kylian Mbappe.
Oh, Benyera, beautifully done.
Cornet finds Dembele. The first touch is good. The second is deadly.
Neymar still. Oh my word, what a goal.
Golovin. Lovely finish. Ajax delivery. Guendouzi's header.
Here's an opportunity. Sanchez.
Outrageous goal from Gael Kakuta. Play it again. And Marseille have the points.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of Le Beau Jeu, the official Ligue Uber Eats podcast in English, twice a month from your telephone into your ears. Everything you need to know about French football, Ligue 1, Le Championnat. And coming up in today's show, we've got a full review of the last 2 weeks of Ligue 1 football and the French clubs in Europe as well. We've got interviews with Strasbourg boss and former AS Cannes legend Patrick Vieira, may have also won the World Cup. We're going to hear from PSG midfielder Vitinha and give you the lowdown on another gem from the Monaco Academy, Soungoutou Magassa. And of course, we're announcing who has won the OGC Nice Terra Moffi jersey, as well as giving you the chance to get your hands on a Kevin Danso Lens jersey in our quiz, Déjà Who. So to help us decipher all this and more with me, Robbie Thomson, I'm very pleased to be joined by Ligue 1 commentator and AFP scribe, Andy Scott. Andy, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, Robbie. Thanks for having me.
Evening here in the west of Australia, or perhaps good morning for others as well. It's only just clicked over into afternoon in France as well. And CBS-Viacom's man on the ground in France, Jonathan Johnson. JJ, a pleasure as always. Thank you for your time.
Hey there, guys. Great to be on with you and looking forward to it.
Don't forget, you can join the conversation on Twitter at Ligue1_ENG. You can like, subscribe, follow, and recommend the podcast on all your podcast platforms and catch up with all the news, interviews, videos, everything, all the facts on Ligue1.com. Well, like always, we're going to start with a review of the last 2 weeks of action. However, unfortunately, I think pretty much the last 2 rounds have been overshadowed by the events that took place, with the very final match of the round this weekend. Really terrible scenes, the likes of which I can't remember having seen, where one of the actual members of staff or players have been injured on the way to the ground when Olympique Lyonnais' coach was attacked just outside the Stade Vélodrome by Marseille fans. Do we have to put allegedly in all this? I mean, we've seen the videos and everything else. It's pretty clear what's been happening. Fabio Grosso arrived at the stadium. Now, depending on which report you hear, the cause of it, but with a bad cut over his left eye that required 12 stitches inside. The match was called off. We're going to sort of decipher and unpack everything that happened, or from our understanding of it at least, at this stage of what happened, but also ask the question, why does this happen? Why did it happen in France? Why did it happen at this game with these two sets of supporters as well? And what's going to happen? What can be the repercussions moving forward for this one? What I will say before opening it up to the guys is that this is not the first time we've had these incidents between these two clubs in this very fixture. Mathieu Valbuena returning in 2015 was a big event that was a very turbulent and tense affair that even had an effigy of Mathieu Valbuena hung from the Stade Vélodrome stands when he left Marseille as something of a cult figure to join Olympique Lyonnais. In 2017, there was a full, 2 teams emptying the bench and a fight at the full-time whistle between them where Anthony Lopez, Marcelo, Adil Rami or Campos were all involved. There were long suspensions handed out for the players. There's no love lost between these two sides, I think is the best way to put it. But it is inexcusable, it is unacceptable that these tensions, this rivalry, which are so often considered positive terms for a big football fixture, goes over the top, goes too far, transgresses all those lines that should be there. Andy, first of all, how did you experience what was happening, sitting down, ready to watch what was going to be the Olympico? I commentated this match in 2011 when it finished 5-5 and was the most incredible match that I've ever commentated in my life. And to go from something like that, such a great memory, to recurring events like this, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on it. I mean, I think obviously the first thing I would say is that when you talk about, I think there is a need to have a discussion about why these things keep happening. I feel like maybe I'm not the best person to answer that question. I think you probably need a sociologist or, a real expert in issues in French society to explain why these things keep happening. What I can tell you as a journalist covering French football is that these things do happen and they do keep happening. But despite that, I came home yesterday evening having been out in the afternoon, and of course, like an awful lot of people will have done, I put the television on, put Amazon Prime Video on, getting ready to watch the game. I was looking forward to watching the game, and the first thing I saw was, I think the strap line at the bottom of the screen was Olympico en suspens. And I was thinking, I don't understand what's happened here. What could have happened? And obviously, very quickly, it becomes clear that there has been an attack on the Lyon team bus. We saw the images of Fabio Grosso's face, and there was that period of about half an hour where it's like, is this game going to go ahead? And then it doesn't go ahead. So clearly, from the point of view as me sitting in the situation last night as somebody just looking forward to watching the game, well, this is rubbish. The game's not happening, and that's kind of a big problem for the league, for the competition in general. If you have a big game which doesn't end up happening for whatever reason, whether it be weather or something else. And I think that I always think and I think I've said this on the podcast before, because we've talked about, incidents at games between Lyon and Marseille 2 years ago, Nice and Marseille 2 years ago, other matches as well in lower divisions in France where matches have been suspended, stopped for a long time, not started at all. And what I always say is that it's not a bad thing to have an element of not hatred, but rivalry is a good thing, and it can actually help create a better atmosphere in the sense that it can, the two sets of fans are singing at each other, and they really want their team to win. They also want the other team to lose, and it can really make things, create that kind of heated atmosphere, which can be great. It can be a fantastic backdrop for a game. It's what leads to, you get the incredible choreography and stuff because Marseille desperately want to beat Lyon. But it can't cross a line, right? And I think that Adil Rami, who, of course, was amongst the clubs he played for Marseille. He was pitch side last night for the broadcasters on French television. He actually said something which was quite astute. He said, well, Lyon are rivals, but that shouldn't make them enemies, and that is exactly the point. They've crossed the line, and it's just, ultimately it's shocking. The images, the image of Fabio Grosso's face is simply shocking. And, even if you are frustrated that the game didn't go ahead like I was, well, of course, you understand why the game didn't go ahead in those conditions. And it's such a shame. And it's something which French society needs to get a grip on. It's clearly not just a football issue.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's a society issue. I actually think it's not really related to the sport or the rivalry between the two clubs. It speaks more of these kids or these men, for the most part, that for whatever reason need to express themselves violently, need to defend some sort of values that they hold dear. This is an age-old problem with it. But the thing that gets me the most about it, JJ, is that they stop the thing that we're all there for. They stop the very game that is part of this rivalry, that has created all this energy, that has given them this feeling of a family, of an identity, of something to aspire towards, of something to support, which are all these admirable positive things, as Andy was saying. And yet this causes the game to stop. And, ultimately, if this continues and goes to the millionth degree, there will be no game, or at least no fans to the game. And it's cutting off your nose to spite your face. It's lunacy when you look at it like that.
You just sort of look at kind of what's happened during Marseille's season so far. It's not even the first incident that's involved, their fans. And, I'm not trying to sort of, pick on them, but, we know it's a fact that sort of fan pressure pushed out Marcelino as head coach and saw Gennaro Gattuso come in and replace him. It's not even the first incident that we've seen involving fans, concerning Lyon this season. The Lyon fans took the team's poor form into their own hands and, dressed down the players very publicly on the pitch, just a couple of months back. So there is, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, sort of all around many different parts of France at this moment in time. But, every time there seems to be sort of an example of that sort of spills over into the footballing world at this moment in time. It seems to concern sort of one of these two clubs. And I'm not saying that they're alone in that, because obviously there have been incidents, in other, other areas at other clubs, but sort of two of the most recent examples have been Marseille, have been, involving Lyon at this moment in time. And it is extremely frustrating because on the pitch, that's two of the biggest clubs, which, in theory creates one of the best spectacles. Okay, we can sort of argue that, given especially Lyon's current form, it might not have been the best spectacle that we've seen from previous Marseille and Lyon games, certainly not to the degree of the 5-5 that you enjoyed a few years ago, Robbie. But equally at the same time, this is a game that everybody, associated with French football looks forward to because it's two of the bigger clubs. And for this to suddenly be inaccessible because it doesn't get played, is a huge problem. And, it comes at a critical time as well. We all know that sort of the Ligue television rights are sort of up for renewal at this moment in time, and it doesn't help the image of the product in the game when you see stuff like this. That there's no two ways about it. You can't look at the front cover of L'Equipe, which was extremely shocking this Monday, with the picture of Fabio Grosso covered in blood, and think that that's a good image for the league. It's it's absolutely shocking and dreadful, and people outside of France will look at it and wonder if this is sort of what French football is all about. They will have seen incidents in other games. A couple of years ago, Dimitri Payet getting hit by a projectile, that sort of thing. And wonder if this is sort of how France allows the games to be governed. But equally at the same time, there was a tweet from the local police force regarding the game about how this match was an opportunity for the fans to show that they could both be at a game and behaves in a civilized fashion at the same time, and it was a chance missed by them, and you spoke earlier about sort of wanting to have something to vent against, Robbie, some of these people, and there's a lot of ill feeling towards the way that football matches are policed and sort of handled, and the fact that you're not allowed to have both sets of fans at games, and it's been the case for a number of years. So you have that frustration boiling up on one side. You have sort of the societal issues which can be sort of removed on their own from football, but equally sort of combined with that feeling of frustration. And unfortunately it creates really unsavory incidents like these. And it could end up costing French football dear, because it is a terrible image to be, sort of projecting to the rest of the footballing world.
Well, I think I'm not sure it's so closely related to football. I think football, just because it's so popular, the football's the number one sporting event. It's the most money. It's the most eyes on television, and unfortunately, it's a great platform. You allude to sort of societal issues. I mean, we had the France with the retirement, the new retirement age and the riots that followed that. We had issues after the police violence towards killing a young boy in the Paris suburbs, which led to another outbreak of this rebellion within society. And I really believe that football is, in that sense, just a victim of its own success, a victim of, this is a place where you can bring together 40,000 people. It's a platform to be manipulated, to be politicized, and we get further and further away from the game itself. So let's bring it back to the game itself for a second, because these two sides have been struggling. Marseille, after a brightish start to the season, have been struggling. Lyon have been struggling from the start of the season, and it's still the case. But Andy, what do you think will be the ramifications of this on the football pitch, if you like, for these two sides? I mean, it happened outside the ground. Marseille will immediately be just putting their hands up and saying, this is unacceptable, but it's not our fault. Olympique Lyonnais will be saying, this is entirely unacceptable. We don't want to have to play in these conditions. we doubt very much we'll be able to come back and play at the Stade Velodrome, for example. There'll be all sorts of, what can we envisage in the next few days as this all, gets analysed and discussed?
Well, I think obviously it's lunchtime on Monday here now, and just in the last little while, I know that the public prosecutor in Marseille, for example, has been doing a press conference. They've been talking about a number of people who were arrested for throwing projectiles, things like that, and talking about how they're handling other incidents that happened in and around yesterday's game, which didn't happen. Now, clearly, there will be consequences in a legal sense for lots of people who were involved in what happened. Whether that spills over onto the clubs is another issue. We saw Pablo Longoria, the Marseille president, who came out and spoke to the broadcasters last night about his. I think he just said it was inadmissible over and over again, because he was just shocked and, of course, deeply disappointed that this game wasn't happening. But clearly, he would have been confident that there would be no direct impact on the club, because this incident happened outside the stadium. There is only so much that you can do to control your fans, and I use that in the loosest possible term as well, if they're involved in incidents outside the stadium. So from that basis, we don't know. What we do know is that the league said last night that this incident would be referred to one of their own committees, which would make a decision on it, and we just have to wait and see what they say. We saw an incident at the Montpellier-Clermont game a few weeks ago when we saw that firecracker thrown from the stand, which exploded right next to the Clermont goalkeeper, Maury Dio. Montpellier were 4-2 up at the time. There was lots of conjecture about what would happen. There are different possibilities. In the end, the league decided that match would be replayed from the beginning, behind closed doors, and that Montpellier would have a point deducted. Now, that's an incident that happened in the stadium. In this case, you would imagine that the game will go ahead as it was supposed to at another date. I'm not sure how the authorities could say this game has to take place on neutral turf. Ultimately, Marseille are going to have to play games in the Velodrome. That's their own stadium. That's where their fans come. You can't punish 60-odd thousand people just like that. So, at this moment in time, you would imagine the game will eventually be played from the beginning with fans in the stadium, in the Velodrome, and that there will be no direct impact on the clubs involved in terms of points, in terms of sporting punishments or anything like that. But, as is touched on at the beginning, this is a matter that goes very deep into French society, and big decisions will have to be taken. We've seen the sports minister talking about it this morning. It's a big topic in France today, unsurprisingly. So there may be consequences in a sporting sense. But, the game was a victim of what happened. The game, the match, the spectacle was a victim of what happened. This did not happen during the game in the stadium. So we wait, but Marseille and Lyon will not be expecting, I imagine, any punishments as a result of this.
Yeah, I think the fact that there are victims, there seem to be only victims from this situation. This is nobody wins in this sort of event. And JJ, do you have anything to add to that moving forward? Anything that Andy hasn't touched on that you think we could envisage coming out of this?
I think one thing that, you do have to wonder, how far it might be off sort of on the horizon is potentially Marseille taking issues into their own hands, because like I said earlier, it's not the first incident we've seen concerning them this season. The club has gone on record in expressing some of the tensions, or describing some of the tensions with the fans that sort of led to the dismissal or, Marcelino's exit from the club. And you do sort of wonder now if it's getting to a point where Marseille feel like certain groups of their fans are, perhaps, not trustworthy enough regarding, some of these games, that they have to take drastic measures. We have seen it. Okay, it's a long time in the past now, but before Qatar arrived in Paris, the Le Preux plan, as it was known, which basically got rid of all, sort of season ticket access to the stadium, in a bid to eradicate, the most problematic ultra, behavior. Maybe that is something that Marseille, at least start to consider, because of the severity of an event like this. It was bad, but it could have been a lot worse. Sort of the push that led to PSG taking that drastic decision was, at the end of the day, a fatality, somebody dying. that hasn't happened just yet. But, for a head coach of a Ligue 1 team to be sort of impacted and injured, hurt in the way that he was, it suggests that it's only a matter of time unless, really serious measures are taken. So you would have to imagine that that's at least something that is, perhaps considered, based on everything that has happened sort of in and around Stade Velodrome, so far this season. And I would hate to see, a fantastic club like Marseille, that brings so much to Ligue 1 without, supporters, without that fervour at Stade Velodrome. But if this is the kind of thing that's going to keep happening, then something, major changes are going to be needed to be made, by the club, and hard decisions will need to be taken. And perhaps, maybe the threat of that potentially happening, is what's needed to wake up some of the fan base to be more responsible, and to sort of ensure that sort of behavior doesn't, happen in the future.
All right, let's talk football then for the last 2 weeks. Andy, it might become something that we come quite familiar with, but Nice, 1-0. They've won the last two 1-0. They've conceded only four goals all season in their matches so far, in 10 matches so far. Farioli's doing a wonderful job. Nice look like they're finally moving in the right direction. And one of those wins was a last-minute win over Marseille, of course, 2 weeks ago, with Evan Guesson getting the winner.
Yeah, one of the main questions that was being asked of Nice after the game on Friday was, how long can you keep doing this? Because you're winning games 1-0. How do you need to be scoring more goals? I think it's a recognition that they need to be scoring more goals because, how far can they go playing this way with these performances? Are they really going to be qualifying for Europe, bearing in mind the competition beneath them? But I think that most successful teams begin with a solid defensive base, and Francesco Farioli has had remarkable success in that regard. I think, is it 6 clean sheets in 7 or 7 clean sheets in 8? And the one exception was the 3-2 win away to PSG. I mean, that's amazing,
yep.
And that gives them something from which to build. It's not spectacular to watch. That's one of the problems. But it's been effective because not only have they got the results, but they've played against some good teams. I mean, PSG away, Monaco at home, Marseille at home. These are some of the best teams in the country. And I think also what's important in any league, in any country, is to get points on the board early, right? If you can start the season well, that sets you up. It means that if you go through a difficult period, then you've got the points there. You're going to bounce back from it. You're not going to be in a terrible position after that run. Inevitably, there will be a run where Nice don't get great results. They've got a good squad. I don't think it's as good a squad as a lot of other teams. I think that I'm not suggesting they're in a false position, as it were, but I don't think they're going to stay there for too much longer. But, I think that the foundations have been built by Farioli. He is living a honeymoon period because he's only 34. Remember, he's a young manager. He's come into a new country, and it's been a dream start for him. But I do suspect that there will come a point where they do lose a game and then they lose another game and they might get into a real sticky patch, and that will see them drop down the table just a little. But I think for now, things are going their way. On Friday, they missed a penalty. There was a couple of moments where they were maybe a little bit lucky, and they were playing against, let's be honest, one of the worst teams in the division. So, I think we need to be measured about what we say about Nice. I think it's going really well for them just now. They're not going to keep on winning games 1-0 every single week.
One of the worst teams in the division in Clermont Foot, but who did beat Olympique Lyonnais in round 9 quite amazingly. JJ, Paris Saint-Germain, we spoke the last podcast after that defeat in the Champions League to Newcastle as well. We're going to chat European football in a moment, so we won't touch on what they've been doing on the continent since then, but back-to-back wins in Ligue 1, a big win over Strasbourg, where Kylian Mbappe broke his drought, got back to scoring ways. There was some nice football there. And again, now 3-2 away to Brest in a match that they made a little bit more difficult for themselves. And Kylian Mbappe managed to... he's never far from the news at the moment, is he? He's not scoring. We're worried. He is scoring, but he makes a little sign to the fans of Brest that they didn't really appreciate. He missed a penalty, but scored from the rebound to win the match in the final moments. How are you seeing PSG's progress? Because they've only lost once to undefeated Nice, as Andy said, and they're just a point behind now in second place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think they've continued to make progress. I think their return from the international break has been much better than the last one, because let's not forget that the Nice defeat came immediately after one of the international breaks, and I think Luis Enrique has maybe learned how to better deal with the issue of squad depth and sort of when to rotate. Obviously knew not to, rest Kylian Mbappe going into that big European clash with Milan, and got the reward with a goal and an assist, in what was maybe not the most convincing of performances, but PSG coming away from a difficult run of games off the back of the internationals with 3 victories. So I think it is, things are starting to take shape a little bit. Luis Enrique himself seems to have learned from, the lesson of that harsh defeat against Newcastle in Europe. And I think as well, sort of on the Mbappe topic, in Brest, I think PSG maybe got a little ahead of themselves, because obviously Brest have enjoyed a very good season so far, surprise package of Ligue 1 by far and away over the first rounds of games. And I think when PSG found themselves 2-0 up, they are probably asking, what's all the fuss about? Brest have been getting themselves up into a very good position, and suddenly we're still on Champions League form, and we've built ourselves up a nice lead, and then obviously Brest come back into the game. And I think, instead of being outraged at Mbappe, perhaps the Brest fans could maybe take it as a sign of sort of acceptance, recognition that they're actually, part of the competition so far this season, that Mbappe would get sort of worked up into, that sort of competitor mode that, we all know produces sort of his best performances usually, and sort of treats them with the same kind of attitude that he would, a Champions League opponent, for example. There were obviously high stakes, getting towards the final few minutes in the game, and then, getting the winning goal. So, I think there's a number of different ways it can be interpreted. It doesn't necessarily have to be, assumed to be offensive and targeted solely at Brest. I think, Mbappe and PSG are kind of in competitor mode at the moment. And as long as they remain second in the table and not top, I think we will probably see that continue. But it's difficult to talk about PSG at this moment in time and not talk about Warren Zaire-Emery and this explosion of one of Ligue 1's most phenomenal talents. Just the last couple of weeks alone, he seems to have really taken on a different level of maturity and consistency in his performances. And it's exciting times, because we're already discussing the possibility of maybe seeing him representing France at senior level, and he's yet to even turn 18.
Yeah, he certainly is on fire at the moment. Fantastic goal to open the scoring against Brest at the weekend. Andy, Monaco could have gone top. They suffered what was their second defeat of the season at the weekend away to Lille. They're now just a couple of points ahead of Lille as well. So I'd like to start with Lamine Camara's amazing goal 2 weeks ago against Monaco. There they managed to come back, but talk about a young kid. Was that his first goal or in Ligue 1? But from 55 metres out, just an absolutely stunning goal away to Monaco. And then Alexander Golovin showed all his class by getting 2 wonderful goals as well to win that one for Monaco. You got the feeling that Monaco are real contenders. And then, all of a sudden, Lille are on the charge, and Lille knocked them off 2-0. Eden Zegrova is in stunning form at the moment. And suddenly, Lille are climbing, putting the pressure on for that top 3 position at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it kind of comes back to sort of what I was saying about Nice, is that these things kind of balance themselves out. I mean, I thought Lille were excellent last season under Paulo Fonseca, and they had a ever so slightly shaky start to this season. Not a terrible start, but not a brilliant start, and they've started picking up results now. I think it's, over the last couple of months, I think they've only lost once at home to Reims in all competitions. So they've been very good at home for a long time. So that's a difficult game for Monaco to go to. Not really a surprise that Lille won it. And I think it just shows, that we can't get too carried away with anybody. I mean, Monaco had a great start to the season. Adi Hütter clearly had sort of found the key to liberating them, to making them really exciting to watch. But, they lost at home to Nice. They've lost away to Lille. And I think that a lot of these teams, it's difficult to find one standout side. As long as Paris Saint-Germain are not running away with it, if they're dropping the odd point, it keeps everything interesting. I think other teams will continue to drop points against one another. And I think that for me, it was always difficult to say that Monaco might be title contenders or anything like that. Clearly, the likes of Monaco and Lille are teams that can be competing for Champions League qualification. Beyond that, to say that they're potential league champions, I think, is another issue. And of course, it's still relatively early in the season to be talking about that. But it all suggests that it's shaping up to be maybe quite a close season. Certainly, everybody can beat everybody else on their day, and that makes it. We talk about the damage to the product of the incidents in Marseille, but I think on the field, when the games do take place, there's lots of really entertaining football in France at the moment, and that's been the case for a while now, and that's great.
Final talking point from the last 2 weeks then, JJ, are two sides sitting on 12 points. One of them is hitting their stride now at last, Racing Club de Lens, after a slow start for them. Another is starting to go backwards, and that's Rennes, who they're both sitting on 12 points. Rennes in 8th place, Lens in 10th, either side of Marseille, who probably have a game in hand, even though we're not really sure how that's gonna play out at this stage. But how are you seeing Rennes at the moment, and what's going wrong there? I mean, we know Rennes have European football this season, and they're doing okay. So what's going wrong in Ligue 1?
It's a good question. I mean, on the one hand, it is great to see Lens getting sort of back up into that position in the table because, it did feel like their start to the season was perhaps unnecessarily bad. But the issue, I think, with Rennes, sort of certainly as far as I could see since the beginning of the season, there's just been this inability to actually put games to bed. I mean, they've drawn so many matches. They rarely lose, only lost 2, although one of those, did come against PSG at home. Who they normally have a very good record against. But, you look at the fact that they've only won 2 games and they're in the top half of the table. That's the lowest return of any of the teams in the top 9, as it is now with the 18-team league. So, yeah, and until they start finding that sort of, killer mentality in the games to actually put, teams to the sword, I think that Rennes will continue to sort of flounder in mid-table because they are one of the stronger sides in Ligue 1, so they are always going to be difficult to beat. But if they can't actually, get the wins on the board, they're going to keep falling behind in this race for Europe. And it's difficult to sort of pinpoint just one player's injury as, a catalyst for, sort of a bit of underwhelming form. But it does kind of feel like if Martin Terrier can get back to the best form that we know he is capable of, and we've seen from him, like after that, very lengthy layoff through injury, he could really be the difference maker for Rennes, leading into sort of the Christmas break, because he's already come back onto the pitch a couple of times. And potentially over the second half of the season, because it's not too late for Rennes to sort of catch up and get themselves back into the reckoning in Europe. But the longer that they continue to draw these games and not put teams to bed, especially the teams below them in the ranking, that's absolutely vital. And you look at what happened against Strasbourg, the goal that Motiba equalised with, it's palmed down, he taps it in. Okay, Strasbourg were a little unlucky against PSG the week before, so we'll take that, that lucky break. But that's the kind of thing that Rennes need to be, sort of avoiding. Fantastic goal by Truffert to open the scoring, but all in vain when you concede, what, from a Rennes point of view, will be considered a very soft goal.
All right, time to turn our attentions to a European roundup then. I think we'll save our PSG chat to the next episode in Europe to see just whether they are really ready to serve up that cold dish of revenge to Newcastle United, because after what happened at St James's Park, I suspect a lot of people were thinking this is the end of PSG in Europe for another year. Could yet proved to be the end of Newcastle United at the Parc des Princes for this season back at Europe's top table. So let's just wait and see about that one. Lens, after that win over Arsenal, have drawn with Sevilla and PSV Eindhoven as well. Marseille got a big 3-1 victory in the Europa League over Ajax Athens, bouncing back from that loss to Nice. Vitinha with the goal. So Gattuso is maybe starting to turn things around there. They are top of Group B, a point clear of AEK and Brighton, and 3 clear of an Ajax side who have just appointed former Melbourne Heart coach Johnny van Schip. That's a little bit facetious, perhaps. Dutch legend, of course, and used to play alongside Marco van Basten at Ajax, and Probably a Euro 88 winner, I'd say, Johnny Van Schip, but no, I'm not. I'd say he was. Toulouse were beaten and soundly beaten by Liverpool at Anfield. They sit third in Group E, but still plenty to play for in that group as well, with Union Saint-Gilloise there too. Rennes, Guri and Kalimundo were on target as they beat Panathinaikos by 2-1 in Greece. They're top of Group F. And Lille came from behind to defeat Slovan Bratislava by 2-1. They're undefeated and top of Group A in the Conference League as well. Very quickly, gentlemen, Andy, France, a few sides doing very well in Europe. This is something we've come to crave from the Ligue 1 sides. Finally, it looks like it's early days. We're halfway through the group stages, but they're delivering. Perhaps that top 5 status will soon be returned.
Yeah, I think that Lens deserve a lot of credit for what they're doing in the Champions League, unbeaten in 3 games and in quite a strong position to qualify. I think that PSG, I was at the Parc des Princes on Wednesday night. I thought they were impressive. I think some people maybe were less impressed. I think that Milan were very poor in that game, but PSG laid down, it was a bit of a statement from them, so this is, we're going to bounce back from the Newcastle defeat. And of course, as JJ touched on before, Warren Zaire-Emery was exceptional in that game. In particular, and then I was in Marseille on Thursday for the AEK Athens match, and I was, it was entertaining, and as their Europa League games have been this season, and they've done okay. I mean, they've got 4 points from 2 home games. They've set themselves up in what is a tricky group to go on and qualify. I think as long as they beat Ajax at home, which they should be doing at the moment, and as long as they avoid defeat away to AEK, that might just about do them. Marseille need to be progressing in that competition. Rennes quietly getting a good result. So I think, the outlook is a lot better. I think it was always going to be hard for Toulouse in that game against Liverpool. But, we have to say that the big boys delivered last week. Your PSGs and your Marseilles stepped up, got good results at home. The backdrop is always that French football standing in the UEFA table, if you want to call it that. The coefficient ranking is not perhaps been what it should be. So there is this pressure being applied by the media, but results have been fine. It's still early days. It's the midway stage in the group stage of these competitions, and maybe another day we can discuss of the positive impact or not of the fact that clubs are not having to play League Cup ties or midweek Ligue 1 games, and they're able to get a little bit more rest and recovery into these matches. And I think one other thing I would say is that, yes, coming back to Marseille, Vitinha's performance was the big talking point from that game, because he was given the chance ahead of Aubameyang in the starting lineup, and he took it with a nice finish, and then winning the penalty as well, provoking the red card, which really changed the game. And the question is now, is he going to become more of a serious option in that starting lineup? Because he hadn't scored a goal for 2 months. He gets the goal last night, and we're still waiting for him to really kick on. Been a lot of money for him in January. Is this going to be the moment where he really kicks on and starts scoring more regularly for Marseille, which is what they need?
Well, you're listening to Andy Scott, Jonathan Johnson and myself, Robbie Thomson, talking about all the weekend's action or the month's action in France. And now it's time to go from one Vitinha, perhaps, to another. Paris Saint-Germain's Portuguese midfielder Vitinha. I thought he made a great start to life in France last season, playing regularly alongside Marco Verratti, but then he did go off the boil. There was something not quite right. It became perhaps not just a Vitinha problem, but a Paris Saint-Germain problem in the second half of last season. But Luis Enrique has come. He's offered him, JJ, a new tactical challenge, I think, by playing him in a completely different position a lot of the time from what we've become accustomed to seeing him last season and in the rest of his career. But we caught up with him, and Jonathan Johnson is going to tell us a little bit more about PSG's Vitinha.
After a sluggish start to the 2023-24 season in terms of results, Luis Enrique's Paris Saint-Germain side are climbing the Ligue 1 table. Now second behind unbeaten Nice after Monaco's slip-up over the weekend, the French champions will be targeting top spot before the November international break. Back on top of Champions League Group F as well, after blowing Milan away 3-0 at Parc des Princes, Vitinha has been an unsung hero so far this campaign. Portuguese midfielder was one of the standout performers against the Italian giants and put in a shift which France under-21 boss Thierry Henry recognised for its selflessness to free Kylian Mbappe. It's not always been easy for Vitinha, though, who struggled badly over the second half of the 2022-23 term under Christophe Galtier and had a night to forget away at Bayern Munich.
Sometimes you have good days, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it all fits together, it all fits with you. Sometimes you don't, but you have to keep on working. You have to shut up and to keep on working. That's what I've been doing. That's what I'm always going to do.
Vitinha has 1 goal and 1 assist so far this season, with his beautiful effort opening the scoring in a 3-1 win away at Rennes just before the October internationals, although not always enjoying the plaudits that the likes of Warren, Zaire-Emery and Manuel Ugarte have so far. The Portugal international is trying to add more goals to his game.
I really think that 2 goals that I made last year, it's short. I need to do more. That will come, but it's important to have that on my head because nowadays in the modern football, midfielders has to score as well. Even defenders has to score as well. So if I add that to my game, if I score a little bit more, that will help me and our team.
Still just 23, Vitinha came through the ranks with Portuguese giants Porto from the age of 11 and won 2 League and Cup doubles under former Nantes boss Sergio Conceição. Following in his father Vitor Manuel's footsteps as a player, Vitinha caught the eye at youth level with a UEFA Youth League title and also spent a year on loan with Wolverhampton Wanderers. His diminutive size and stature have drawn parallels with the likes of Barcelona and Spain great Andrés Iniesta.
For me, it's obvious. If you are smaller, if you are not strong, you have to have another qualities. You have to think faster because they will arrive. You have to be smarter. If you're growing up and you don't have the strength to duel with the opponent, you have to create something else. And if you move the ball away from them, you have more space to think, to play. And that's evolution. You're doing that in 15 years, 16, 14. Then you became better at that. And it's a very important thing to have, even if you have physicality. It's a very important thing to have.
Vitinha is not the only one to have benefited from PSG's extensive overhaul in the summer of 2023, but the change between Christophe Galtier's time in charge and Luis Enrique's early days has been clear for all to see. The Portuguese creator plays like a freed man on the pitch, which makes a massive change from his struggles over the latter half of 22-23.
It's been great. It's been great. It's a new energy. It's a new. It's a little bit of cliche, but it's a breath of fresh air. You know, we enjoy ourselves and we play good football.
PSG head coach Luis Enrique's style is a perfect fit for Vitinha, who is coming into his own under the Spaniard, who coached not only a memorable Barcelona side to Champions League glory back in 2015, but also a youthful national team after a distinguished playing career. The Portuguese has formed part of the first-choice midfield 3, alongside Zaire-Emery and Ugarte.
Keep the possession. It's the main thing. If you have the ball, you're closer to score. If you don't have the ball, they are closer to score. So if you have the ball, they can score.
Vitinha has matured remarkably quickly, and his international rise has seen him go from Toulon's breakout tournament star of 2019 to a UEFA European Under-19 and Under-21 Championship runner-up. Now a senior international with the 2022 World Cup under his belt, we should see him at Euro 2024 next summer after what could yet be a very successful season in Paris.
Well, AS Monaco are doing a great job at the moment despite their recent loss to Lille. They're doing it with a new coach in Adi Hütter, the Austrian. They're also bringing through a lot of young players that are really catching the eye at the moment. The most recent of them, France Under-21 star Soungoutou Magassa. He's turning heads both for club and country already. The versatile holding midfielder or defender sat down for a chat with our very own Luke Entwistle.
Alongside Magnus Akliush, Soungoutou Magassa is another academy product that's broken into the first team setup at AS Monaco this season. Adi Hütter's side remained top of Ligue 1 following a victory over Metz. And whilst Magassa was absent from that victory due to suspension, he has been a mainstay in Monaco's defence so far this season. I caught up with Magassa earlier this week, and the Frenchman admitted he was surprised by the prominent role that he'd played so far this campaign. Magassa, by trade, is a defensive midfielder, but he's profited from multiple absences to make himself a home at the heart of Monaco's defence. I expected game time, but not as much as this, Magassa told me earlier this week. He added that he didn't expect to pierce into this side as a centre-back, a position where he's used to filling in, but not used to playing full matches. His breakout could and perhaps should have come sooner. Following an early red card from Youssouf Fofana against Rennes at the start of last season, Magassa came on and impressed in his more familiar number 6 role. However, that performance did not prove to be a launchpad. I thought I'd get my chance after the Rennes game, but that didn't happen, and my next match was 6 months later, said Magassa, who added, there was a bit of disappointment in that time. Whilst Magassa found himself on the periphery under former manager Philippe Clement, he is central to Hutter's plans. Whilst the Frenchman sought to avoid comparisons to the previous incumbent of the left centre-back position, Benoit Badiashile, now of Chelsea, there are certainly stylistic similarities between the two players. Magassa is aggressive in pushing into the midfield, is committed in the duels, and as you would expect of a midfielder, is calm on the ball and displays a good range of passing. And that form this season has not gone unnoticed. Magassa recently got his call to Thierry Henry's Espoir, and his inclusion in the France Under-21 side saw Magassa reunited with Henry, whom he knows from his time at Monaco. I spoke with him when I was in the academy on multiple occasions, as he's very close with the young players, and I'm very proud to be with him again with the Espoir, Magassa told me. Of course, Henry, a former legend and a continued legend at AS Monaco, both as a player and as a manager. During the international break, Magassa was once again deployed in defence, this time in an even more unfamiliar back four. But perhaps it is in this unfamiliar role that Magassa's future lies, both for club and for country. Having returned to the Principality club, Magassa is now looking to continue his form and keep Monaco atop the tree. Prior to the season, the club set its sights on achieving European football, and despite their league standing, neither Magassa nor Monaco are getting carried away. The road is long, our objective is Europe, but we're not limiting ourselves, said Magassa. Based on performances so far, Magassa and Monaco can certainly allow themselves to be ambitious this season and beyond.
Don't forget to join in the conversation at Ligue1_ENG for English on Twitter, or X as it's known now. And of course, like, subscribe, follow, and recommend. Tell your friends about us on all your favourite podcast platforms. Now it's time for that segment where you, the listeners, raid your memory banks of French football, engage in a brute force attack on the internet to try and make sense of these cryptic clues that I'm going to give you to identify a Ligue 1 player, past or present. That's right, it's the world's leading and only Ligue 1 Uber Eats quiz in English, Déjà Who. Don't worry, it's not all hard work. If you get the answer right, you go into the running for a jersey. Speaking of which, the October winner of our Terra Moffi jersey is going to be announced on today's pod. But first of all, the answers for our last 2 episodes. First up, it was Nigerian legend John Utaka, who along with Olivier Giroud helped Montpellier to the title in 2012. And you can download our Ligue 1 Legends segment on that dramatic title win, if you missed it, from our history professor Andreas Evagora. And John Utaka is now part of the coaching staff at Montpellier as well. The second answer for October was another Nigerian, Taribo West, who made his name with Auxerre in the mid-1990s, lighting up Ligue 1. He did a Ligue 1 Cup double with those green braids in his hair before heading to Italian football with Inter in 1997. And if you're wondering what Mr. West is now up to, it's no longer Mr. He's a pastor, having founded, not lacking in ambition, his very own church. And it's called The Shelter in the Storm Miracle Ministries of All Nation. Quite the mouthful in Lagos. That was after he hung up his boots in 2007. Our winner of the Nice shirt is Rowan Perrior, who, fittingly, is a Nice fan from England. We trust he will enjoy sporting his brand new Terra Moffi jersey, especially as Nice are sitting top of the Ligue 1 Uber Eats standings at the moment. Congratulations, Rowan. We'll be in touch shortly to get that shirt out to you. And now then, for this week's question, the first of 2 for November, a month in which we will be giving away Kevin Danso's jersey from Lens. Here goes. Who am I? My father was an academy coach at a professional club in France where me and my brother both began our youth careers and where my uncle also played. At 17, I moved south to another youth academy, and at 19, I made my Ligue 1 debut before I'd even signed a professional contract. The following year, my first full Ligue 1 season, I helped my club to qualify for the Europa League and was nominated for Ligue 1 Young Player of the Year. A change of France national team coach then saw me earn my first international cap, and that was followed by a move across the channel where I played for 2 different teams, losing an FA Cup final and picking up 1 Club Player of the Year award. Another move to another country saw me play a starring role in winning the Europa League and also making a Champions League semi-final. I'm still playing. Who am I? So if you have it or simply think you might have it, send your answers to Ligue 1 Podcast, Ligue 1 Podcast at gmail.com. Drop us an email with who you think it is, this mystery player, and you can go into the running for that Kevin Danso Lens jersey. So, after coaching OGC Nice between June 2018 and December 2020, legendary France and Arsenal midfielder Patrick Vieira is back again in Ligue 1, this time with the ambitious project helmed by Strasbourg president Marc Keller, the 1998 World Cup and Euro 2000 winner, famously one of Arsenal's invincibles from that 2003-04 season, sat down for a chat about his return to France and what he and Keller are cooking over in the east of France. Andy Scott has more.
Patrick Vieira's return to Ligue 1, I think, has been one of the most interesting stories to follow in French football this season. Obviously, he's a huge figure in the French game, having been part of that World Cup winning team 25 years ago now. And at his age, I mean, we think of him as a young coach in some respects, but he is now 47. He's accumulated quite a lot of experience, and you look at what he did previously, obviously working in the States. I think he did quite well at New York City FC, and then he came to Nice. He took them into Europe. He did some good work at Crystal Palace, and I think he feels this is the next step in his managerial career. He feels that it's the right environment to come into to take a club forwards. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he does there. I mean, Marc Keller is somebody who Vieira credits with being really important, obviously, in him making this decision to go to the Stade de la Méno. Keller was a teammate of his with the French national team. I think maybe the only time that Keller ever played for Les Bleus. And they knew each other as well from England, because Keller was playing for West Ham while Vieira was at Arsenal. So Vieira says in the interview that they'd always kept in touch and that Marc Keller had a big impact on his decision. And it was just an opportunity for him to come back and have the smell of the grass, I think is what he says. He loves to be a manager. And he finds that he's a calmer figure than he was when he was a player, which I find really fascinating. So, he says in the interview that it was the right project for him, albeit coming into a young team. And I think he clearly feels it's a chance for him to take a big club and take them to the next level, but also for him to take the next step in his own managerial career.
I am really pleased to come back in France after my last experience with l'OGC Nice, and I was looking forward to the project that I can express myself as a manager. I wanted to come back in the game. I didn't really thought a lot about which league to go for, but obviously when Strasbourg came, I think it was the right project at the right time for me to express myself as a manager. The way that this club grew in the last 10 years been phenomenal. This is why you can see a lot of work around the training facility, around the stadium. The clubs went from one level to the next one with not having the time to build the facilities to sustain the Ligue 1 demand. And there's a lot of work around, and that's just show what this football club will be in the next couple of years. And we just have to be a little bit more patient with the group of players that we have, with the football club putting in place all what you need to grow and to grow the brand of Strasbourg.
Obviously, the main theme about Strasbourg this season, we talk about them, is the fact that they were bought out by Blueco, who are the owners of Chelsea. That was back in June, so in the closed season, it made it quite a turbulent closed season. People looked at Strasbourg and thought this is an interesting project. Obviously, doubts about maybe their identity. Some supporters have not been entirely won over by the idea of having the same owners as, let's be honest, a bigger club in the Premier League, this huge league just across the channel. And so questions about the identity are there, and Patrick Vieira is having to defend really what Strasbourg are doing. But I think one of the key things here is that this is a team which is, as he says, in a new cycle. And if you think back to the Strasbourg team, which finished 6th in the 2021-22 season, very close to qualifying for Europe, if you look at the key players from that team, a lot of them have departed. Indeed, if you look at the spine of the team from last season, if you take out Matt Sells, the goalkeeper, who is still there, you have Alexander Djikou, really important central defender, who departed. You have Habib Diallo, who was the main goal scorer, and he was sold. I mean, he was expected to be sold, but his departure was always going to be hard to replace. And then, not even on the eve of the season, but once the season had already started, they lost Jean-Rickner Bellegarde's inspirational presence in the midfield, great at set pieces, driving force in that team. They lost him as well, sold to Wolves in England. And so they've lost key players. I mean, you go back to the season before that, and the list is longer. Guys like Ajorc, Thomasson, Cassie leaving as well. They're having to rebuild, and they're very deliberately putting their faith in young players. The average age of the squad has come down quite drastically. And therefore, as Vieira says, when you sign young players, it's not just that you are bringing in young players who don't have, they don't have the experience, and because they're younger, but also the players that Strasbourg are signing are players who don't have that experience of the Ligue 1. The guys who maybe come in from Bordeaux in the second division, for example, or Angelo Gabriel, very raw young talent brought over from Brazil via Chelsea. And so they're having to develop, Vieira's having to develop this team, make them competitive in a really competitive league with all these young players. And ultimately the results have not really been there yet. And they'd lost 4 games in a row before Sunday's match at Rennes, which they came back to draw 1-1. They've had just 1 win in 7. That was a 1-0 victory at Metz, a game which I commentated, and have to say they were not especially convincing. So they have a lot of work to do, just 9 goals scored so far. Only the bottom 3 have scored fewer. But ultimately, Patrick Vieira insists that it's down to youth, and that means it's going to take time.
Sometimes people forget what and where the club were last year. We start the pre-season with losing some key players. And we lost in total 7 players who are quite really important and were really important for this football club. And we replaced them with talent. Young players, but not just with the age, but young with the experience in Ligue 1. And people forget that. And the only focus that people have at the moment is about Chelsea are owning Strasbourg. So when we're talking about Chelsea, we're talking about success. We're talking about winning the Ligue 1. We are far away from that. We are in a new cycle. So it's important to really understand who we are and where we are today.
And Vieira has come into this environment at Strasbourg in what he acknowledges is a harder league than when he managed at Nice. I mean, it's nearly 3 years now since he left Nice. As I said, he took them into Europe in his second season there, and then a difficult start to the following season cost him his job. And now he feels that the league has become harder, not just because there are more teams ultimately who are there competing. There's more, perhaps, investment. There are more quality players spread around the league. And also the simple fact that there are 2 fewer teams in the league, which means that if you're looking over your shoulder, there's more of a danger that you're going to get sucked into trouble at the bottom. So he is conscious of the greater challenges now for competing in the French top flight.
I think having 2 less teams in the league make it even more competitive now. Anybody can beat anybody, but you've seen teams like Monaco spend big money, quality squad, and they are reducing the gap between them and Paris Saint-Germain. And of course, you still have Paris Saint-Germain at the top. But I would say the French league became more competitive than ever this year. Yeah, there is more teams that can win games away from home, teams that are physically really strong, tactically well organized, and teams who have players who can make any difference at any time during the game. So there's a lot of good teams in France.
Okay, gentlemen, time to look ahead to the next 2 weeks then. Our final segment in this, once again, lengthy podcast, as it always is. There's always so much to talk about when it comes to Ligue 1 football, and we know you at home love hearing the latest and the inside line from our experts today. Andy Scott, Ligue 1 commentator, you would have heard him on the World Feed and also works for AFP, and Jonathan Johnson, of course, who you'll see his articles popping up all over the place. So let's have a look. We've got 2 rounds coming up in the next 2 weeks, rounds 11 and 12. It all gets started on Friday night, this Friday, when PSG take on Montpellier. We've got Marseille against Lille as well. So Marseille definitely looking to stop the slide in the league, and a lot going on at the club. Same can be said for Olympique Lyonnais, who take on FC Metz. And that match has a little bit of history as well. We remember Anthony Lopez getting hit by a firecracker Montpellier star a couple of years ago as well. Monaco need to bounce back at Brest. Nice are up against Rennes as well. Rennes, another side that we know have the quality, against a Nice side, undefeated and top of the table. And then in 2 weeks' time, the big games keep coming. Montpellier against Nice, Reims PSG, Monaco on the road to promoted Le Havre, who are making a pretty good fist of their return to the top flight after 15 years as well. Rennes, Lyon, for the nostalgic amongst us that remember the early noughties when Rennes were about the only side that could ever seem to knock off Olympique Lyonnais consistently at any rate. And then Lens versus Marseille. So 2 clubs that have been in the news, being involved in big matches coming up. JJ, you first in round 11. What catches your eye, and what do you expect to come from a full round of fixtures?
Well, to be honest, looking ahead to sort of both rounds of games, I'm really curious to see how Rennes fare, because they've got 2 very interesting matchups. One, you've got them up against Nice, who, on paper, that could be the tricky game that Andy was alluding to earlier, where Nice finally come unstuck, because we know that Rennes on any given day can beat pretty much anybody in Ligue 1, and they need to start turning those draws into victories. So perhaps, that battle of the 2 teams in red and black, we'll finally see Nice fall and that unbeaten record, put to an end for the season. And also, if Rennes don't win that game, I like the look of their second game, because that is, potentially very tricky one against Lyon. Bruno Genesio going up against his former club, who would dearly love to take points off of him and Rennes as they try to get themselves out of the mess that they're in at the bottom of the table. So I'm going to be keeping my eye on Rennes for these next 2 rounds of games, I think.
Andy, what about you, looking ahead to these next 2 rounds of action coming up, where, we've got an undefeated Nice at the top, but at the other end of the table, we've got a few clubs who are really starting to struggle now. And I say that because, we don't expect to see Nice or, Reims up there at the top come the end of the season necessarily. We still find it difficult to understand that Olympique Lyonnais are without a win and at the bottom of the table. And I saw an interesting thing, like a Lyon fan's worst nightmare is being relegated in the season where Saint-Etienne could be promoted back from Ligue 2 as well. You talk about rivalries. That's a very passionate one, and that would be just about too much for any Olympique Lyonnais fan to bear. But my point about the trends that we're seeing in the league table and surprises, both negative and positive, is that after these next 2 rounds of matches, we're going to be a third of the way through the season. And that's not nothing. A third of the way through the season means that, it's time to put the money where the mouth is.
Time flies. Time goes too quickly, But yeah, obviously the season's a bit shorter nowadays with just an 18-team league. Mm-hmm. I think if you look at the next couple of rounds, you could argue that the standout fixture might be Reims against PSG, because Reims are quite an entertaining team to watch. They've got some good results already, again, this season under Will Still, and they might be quite capable of giving PSG a game. PSG have come unstuck there a couple of times in the Qatar era. So that could be a game to watch. But I think in terms of 2 clubs to look out for, we've talked about Marseille and Lyon. Marseille have got 2 really big games, Lille at home and Lens away. Really interesting. Lille are sort of coming back up the table. Lens are on a resurgence as well. So it's going to be really fascinating to see, because this is an important stage for Marseille, with Gennaro Gattuso still kind of settling in. Did a couple of wins, but it's still early days for him. They need to start climbing the table too. So I think we'll have a really good idea of where they stand after these games. And in the case of Lyon, I think their game coming up, is it this weekend that they play Metz at home?
Metz.
That's massive. I mean,
they're already 6 points behind Metz already.
Yeah, and Lyon, we're going to be into November, and Lyon will not have won a league game, which is absolutely incredible. Fabio Grosso was the victim of a terrible incident in Marseille last night, but this comes at a time when there are big question marks about whether he is actually the man to lead Lyon out of the state in which they're in. We haven't actually touched on the problems behind the scenes at Lyon over the last couple of weeks. Talk about a mole in the dressing room leaking things to the press, and Grosso reportedly, going out looking for this mole, saying, reveal yourself, and then cancelling a training session. And this has all been built up to be something perhaps bigger than it really is. But the bottom line is that even without what happened last night, Lyon are in the depths of a terrible crisis. And this game against Metz is one they really need to win, because Metz, I've seen a couple of times, I don't think they're up to much, to be honest with you. They went 4 straight defeats before getting a draw yesterday. I think if Lyon can't win that game off the back of losing at home to Clermont, then they really, maybe even John Textor will have to come out and admit that they are in a relegation dogfight, because he famously, a week ago after the Clermont defeat, said, no, we're not going to go down. They really might, and this is getting serious for them. So I think that is really one to look out for next weekend. But yeah, there are plenty of games to keep an eye on at both ends of the table, that's for sure.
Just a little update as well on Stade de Reims, because Will Still was sent off in their 1-0 victory at the weekend over Lorient, where a certain Wilson Esbrand got the winner, the Englishman who's currently on loan from Manchester City, getting the winner for Reims. And a big win over Lorient, important for them. Reims currently sitting in 5th place, and I assume in 2 weeks' time, Will Still will be back on the bench for that one at home to PSG. Well, you have been listening to Andy Scott, Jonathan Johnson, and myself, Robbie Thomson. One more plug for Ligue1.com, the website that has it all. Twitter at Ligue1_ENG, and of course the podcast. Like, subscribe, sign up, download it, listen to it, tell your friends about it. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with a full wrap-up of rounds 11 and 12, looking ahead as we start to get right into the midway point of the season. After a week off, Professor Andreas Evagora will be back as well, looking into the recent history of the championship. And I think we could be looking at one of the early, perhaps the first of the Qatari-era championships for Paris Saint-Germain as well. Warren Zaire-Emery, we spoke a little bit about him, just how impressive he's been. We're going to find out a whole lot more about him in the next episode as well. Déjà Who will be back with another chance to win that Kevin Danso shirt and a whole lot more. So Andy, Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Robbie.
Always a pleasure.
And we will see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.
Again, did Marseille have the points?